This trio has become a festival favorite at Rocky Grass, Celtic Connections, Winnipeg Folk Festival, Merlefest, and regularly tour the US, UK, Germany, and their homeland here in Canada. I am joined by John Showman of Lonesome Ace Stringband. You play the fiddle.
That's correct, I do.
And you guys just released October 13th, your new album and fifth album, Try to Make It Fly.
It's our fifth studio album, but our sixth album. We managed to capture a show in Vancouver, a live show on camera and on microphone, and we actually released that over the pandemic as a live album. That was one of the big challenges for us, was finding stuff to do during the pandemic, and we managed to. So we kind of managed to stay on our feet, and this album's kind of the fruition of that, I would say.
You had footage and obviously recording, and then later on during the pandemic decided to put that together?
Yeah, initially we had sort of envisioned it as an album, but we recorded it basically at the end of 2019. So that was, shall we say, scant months before everything shut down. That became a project maybe a year into the pandemic, just because at that point we had no idea what was going on. Nobody really did. So we were fortunate. We were just lucky to manage to get something that was going to give us a bit of a shot in the arm and keep us alive, keep the band on life support for 2.5 years of basically not touring. So
right. And while you weren't touring, is that when you wrote the songs for this album that came out 2023?
Yeah, absolutely. What had happened before the pandemic was our bass player Max had basically moved out west to BC with his wife. They were expecting a baby, and they actually built a house on raw land. And so in a way, he was going to be taking a fairly slow 2020 anyway. Mm-hmm. So in a way, the pandemic happened at a good time for him and sort of for us. But Chris and I kind of kept we would get together all the time, outdoors, socially distanced, and we would record ourselves playing fiddle and banjo tunes, and we put those out on social media like every Friday. And we did dozens and dozens of these, maybe up to 100 at this point. It just became this thing where we kind of would create content all the time, and that at least kept the creative kind of spark alive for us. And we would get together at his family's cottage, and my family's got one too, sort of a few hours north of Toronto up in the Kawarthas. And we go up there, and whenever we could scrounge together like 48 hours, we'd kind of go up there and just sit down and write a whole bunch of songs and see what stuck and what didn't. And this was mostly like in the fall of 2020 and then over the course of 2021. And then in 2022, we were able to make the record. Once the restrictions had fully lifted, we were back to touring, and the band kind of found its footing again after 6 months of gigging. And then we made the record, and we're really happy with it.
Okay, so did you go and record stuff prior? And there was something in here that you scrapped everything and started fresh. Yeah. Okay. So
yes, that is true. I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't know if that was a detail you wanted, but it's a good story anyway. We got together in 2021, and we hadn't really played any live shows in like literally a year and a half. And we spent about 6 days with Max. He flew in, and we wrote all the stuff for the album, and we were really happy with it. And we went into a studio with a friend, and I think we were a little unsure. Like, we didn't have our usual groove that we have after, playing 100 plus shows a year for the last, 12 years. So we were kind of like, oh, maybe we can synthesize things and, multi-track stuff and use a click track in the studio. And we did that, and we actually recorded the whole record. But I went back to listen to it with Chris, and maybe about 3 months later, and it's just like, it felt lifeless. There was something missing. And Chris thought, I don't know if we can use this. And so I said, okay, let's scrap the whole thing.
So all of that time, money, studio time, money.
Yeah, we were several grand into it. We lost a sizable chunk of money. But it's, the fact is that if you want to get something done, I feel like if you want to get something done in business or in art and you have a vision for it, you sort of have to make sacrifices, or it's just not going to be what you want. And at a certain point, you need to make it what you want. Like, there's obviously, you can accept a certain amount of deviation from what you're imagining, but if it's just not happening, you've got to be willing to cut ties, cut bait and let it go. So we did, and that was lucky. It was the kind of thing where you have to just take a big sigh and say, okay, we lost a month of work and a lot of money, and it's done, and now we're going to do it again.
Yep, start
and so,
over.
Yeah, we found that we went the completely opposite approach. For one thing, we went and recorded it after we'd already played like 50 plus shows in 2022, starting in the spring, and we went in the fall. We found this studio on Wolf Island, which is it's not like far from civilization, but it's pretty remote in a way. You have to get there by ferry. It's near Kingston, Ontario. It's beautiful. It's out in Lake Ontario, but not a lot of people there, especially in the off season, right? So we were there in the fall. We recorded it with this guy called Jason Mercer, who's a bass player from Toronto. He's awesome. He has a studio called Neptune's Machine, and it's basically just one room. Looks like a tiny little airplane, a boat hangar, with stucco kind of foam insulation all over the walls and like a dark, cool, warm vibe, a bunch of old gear and some good mics. And we just set up in that room and got an Airbnb literally stumbling distance from there. Got a bunch of shrooms and pot and beer and sat down and worked really hard on a record for 6 days.
Oh, wow. And so because you don't have a drummer, so there's a couple of songs I was listening to on the new album. It kicks off with Sweeter Sound, and there's some drums in there.
Absolutely.
So what are you doing for that? And then what do you do on tour? Do you just do it sans drums or?
Absolutely. We just do it as a trio. We wanted to beef up the album a little bit. Once we had all our bed tracks done, we recorded them live at that studio I was talking about. Mm-hmm. And we got a friend here, Gavin Gardner, who's great. Who's, again, got a very similar vibe of studio, just lots of great gear, music first, gear second, but tons of stuff to choose from. And he's really experienced with recording all kinds of different instruments. So we have, we got half a dozen or more guest artists. We got the singer from Bahamas, Felicity Williams. She's on that track as well. We hired Justin Ruppel's a drummer. I'd only met him in the course of the session, but he's really good. And so he recorded drums. Again, so here's another example of scrapping things. We didn't like the way Sweeter Sound was feeling. And eventually we decided the drum groove wasn't right. So we scrapped yet something again. So we got rid of his drum playing on that record and replaced it with Max's brother, who's a great drummer, great piano player. And he just kind of had this sort of weird New Orleans kind of vibe on the drums that we liked. So we used that. But really what we wanted to do is just kind of make the album sound a little beefier and not just with the drums, but we double tracked a lot of stuff after the fact too. And we brought in a great steel player. Like I said, Felicity Williams came in, sang background vocals. Our friend Adrian Gross he played mandolin on a couple tracks. We have Ferris Romero singing some backups. So we just kind of wanted to make the thing big and full. Like
you said, you've beefed it up, and from previous records, it's definitely got a different sound.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can hear there's definitely big hints being dropped of what we sound like as a string band. But aside from that, we just kind of wanted to try to, use all the sounds that we've developed, from playing 1,200 shows just as our trio. Yeah.
On the barbecue flavored single, Smoke on the Shoulder, who is doing the beat there? I didn't watch the music video for it, but when I was listening to the song, I'm like, what is that sound?
Oh yeah, the sound, that's a 1970s drum loop. It's basically a metronome. We were playing that in the studio. And that is one of the 12 tracks that we weren't really getting the groove of. Like, it just kind of wasn't happening. The others were all fine. That one needed something extra. And so Jason was like, look, I got this drum loop. It's dead simple. It's got this kind of vintage drum sound. Just play to that. So he played to that, and the groove was great. Like, it sat perfectly. And then, we listened to it, and I was like, you know what? I think I like it better with the metronome drum groove still in there. So we put it back in, kind of spent a little time mixing it, and then suddenly it's got this sort of, hilarious kind of vibe.
Yeah, well, it sounds great.
You got to check out the video. The video is good. We went full. I got a friend who's got like a big cast iron barbecue, like offset smoker. Yeah. We rented a giant pig costume, and we kind of went to town on that one. Got a bunch of big pieces of meat and kind of smoked one of them and then paraded the other one around. So it's a little disturbing.
But you got to claim it as a business expense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I claim walking my dog sometimes as a business expense. I'm talking to people.
So you guys are just past the halfway mark of like 28, 29 dates. You're taking a little rest right now before heading out west to Alberta?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, rest is maybe a relative term. I got I got a wife, a dog, 2 kids, and a house. So the rest is almost the road.
You're catching up.
Yeah, exactly. We're leaving again on Wednesday. We're doing a 2-week tour. We're starting off in Edmonton. We're going to wind up basically in the Okanagan after doing a huge loop down through Montana, Washington State, Portland, Oregon. We're also playing in Sisters, I think. And then heading up north, playing a show in Victoria, Vancouver.
How do you guys travel?
A variety of ways. Usually, whoever's closest has the other people fly to him. But I mean, that's Chris and I live very close to one another. So we either fly out west, and then Max will meet us, or we rent a car and then tour. If it's out here, Max will fly out to Toronto, then we rent a car and tour.
Okay.
It's basically, car rentals. And usually we're pretty amazingly good at fitting all our stuff in a standard SUV. It's tight, but it works.
That's lucky for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to load up the U-Hauls or anything like that.
Oh God, no. That would be a disaster. That's one of the advantages of playing acoustic music, I gotta say.
Yeah.
The lack of gear is really noticeable. The number of variables increases exponentially as soon as you start towing something behind your car. I mean, so many things can go wrong. We've been touring for so long and do so many dates. It's just sounds like a recipe for trouble.
Yeah. You have quite a bit of touring left to do. Like you said, that big loop and celebrating your new album. So you're playing that. Are you playing a lot of your old stuff too? Like, how long's the show for you?
Our shows are usually, we'll either play one kind of 80-minute set or 90-minute set. That's usually what we do. Sometimes, depending on the venue, they'll want us to play a longer set and then a shorter set with a little intermission. I kind of prefer the one shot. It's sort of, you can get into a kind of bigger arc of narrative, But I mean, we play pretty much everything off the record, and then we'll throw in sort of whatever songs we feel like singing at the time. Sometimes people request something. We'll figure out a way to throw that in. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of sprinkling in stuff from our old albums. But I'd say 60 to 70% of it is just the tracks from the new record.
Well, looking forward to hearing it live. You've got some Canadian dates and, of course, American dates coming up. And then what's 2024 looking like for you? 2024
is going to have us, we're going to be touring down into the southern states in January. Then February, we're doing a bunch of stuff in Ontario. I think we're playing in April. We're also going out to Kansas. We're flying out to Kansas, playing some shows there. Then we're doing into Michigan, playing a bunch of dates there. And then our summer, we've got something booked up in Thunder Bay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to spill too many beans, but we're booked to play some stuff in Vermont and Maine.
And summer's festival season.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's going to there are a lot of potentials. There's some stuff in Europe we'll likely do, just a matter of kind of choosing. And it's good. I mean, it's nice that we've got some momentum in terms of booking and making that happen. And one thing that's great about our band, too, is that it's basically, management-wise, it's sort of a two-man game. It's me and Chris. We do the bulk of the booking, pretty much all the graphics, everything. So We just kind of run it like a small business, and we do everything. We have a friend of ours, Tamara Cater, who does kind of project by project, helps us manage stuff. She's really great. And we have an awesome U.S. agent who won't touch anything that doesn't pay a lot of money, which is good for us, because that means we can just book ourselves, tours. And if there's a gig where, let's give this to Mike, then you know what I mean? It's good that we have like a pretty easy, small, tiny team in place, and Chris and I make all the decisions with Max, but Max is further away, so doesn't quite factor into the day-to-day stuff.
Well, you were saying you like the smaller venues, too, for playing.
Oh, it's great. I mean, ideally, I like playing for about 100 to 200 people in a small-ish room with great sound, whether that's like a venue, something like Rivoli, say. There's a Rivoli in every city. Or something like that. Those are kind of my favorite venues, the sort of ones where there's a bar in the venue, but people are there to see music. That's kind of our vibe.
Right.
But, there's lots of great theaters, even cool little house concerts, sometimes weird, especially in the States, like weird old funky town halls that have been converted into theater, into music and theater spaces.
Right.
Like, those are awesome.
Yeah.
The UK is peppered with those too. Like UK dates are kind of actually amazing for that. There's always weird, repossessed, repurposed spaces. I just love that stuff.
Well, that's awesome that you manage that pretty much yourself.
Yeah, we've been doing it for so long at this point, and we still love it. So why relinquish any of the control of that? It makes us love it less.
If it ain't broken, don't fix it, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well,
100%.
Thank you so much for taking the time with me, and best of luck on the rest of your tour. It's great to hear your new album, and best of luck with that as well.
Hey, thanks a lot, Dana. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the questions too. Like, I can tell you thought about this and know what we sound like. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.